Raina Gandhi, welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm well, thanks, Elliot. How are you?
I am very well. Thank you so much for asking. Excited to dive into our conversation today and go through all the topics that we have to discuss. But before we do, can you give the listeners a bit of context about who you are and what it is that you do?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. And thanks again for having me. I really appreciate being here and I'm very excited to speak to you today. I am what's called a women centered coach. I help women who are in the workforce who want to move up that career ladder, but are struggling to do so because of barriers that they're facing, whether they're internal, like imposter syndrome or in the inner critic, or external in terms of not being able to self advocate or ask for that promotion that they know they deserve or put their name in the hat for a new job or a new position. So really, we dig deep into understanding where those thoughts are coming from, where that started from, and then also what along the way has changed that has changed their narrative so that they can understand that whatever it is that's stopping them now from moving forward, that's keeping them stuck, may not even be the narrative that is their truth. So a lot of times we end up telling ourselves things that are maybe held truth in our youth, or maybe we were told in our youth, even though they weren't true, and we're still holding on to them. And that's really stopping us from moving forward. And so I help women uncover those things and then thrive in the workforce, because I truly believe that if women want to stay in the workforce, that they should be empowered to do so, and that with their perspective, that organizations also are going to really benefit, right? Because what ends up happening is so few women are able to get there sometimes because of their being stuck. But once they get there, they thrive because they're able to give their perspective. Now, if they're the only woman on the team, if there's let's say there's a group of 10 board members and they're the only women on the team, oftentimes what they have to do is they have to sort of elbow other women out of the way. And so we don't want that, right? We want them to get there and we want them to make room for each other. And the other thing that we want is we want them to bring their feminine energy, all the things that makes them really good at what they do. So that inclusivity, that fairness, that ability to listen really well, to collaborate. Those things are what make women really strong. And oftentimes they're not able to bring their full authentic selves because they want to fit in with the men. They're in the minority. They don't want to be singled out. And so what ends up happening is a lot of times the organizations miss out on having a full perspective, and others miss out because they're not learning from these women. And then women miss out because we're not able to bring our authentic selves to work. So really the idea is to help them thrive and feel fulfilled in their careers, and to be able to bring their authentic selves.
I love that. I think that there's a giant space in the market for that. I truly think there is. I'm glad that you're filling it. And I'm curious where this all begun for you. I have a good feeling it came from a personal journey that you went through as well. So can you roll the years back a little bit and tell us about how you went through this yourself?
Sure, yeah, I would love to. Thanks for asking. I am a first generation American. My parents immigrated from India in the late 60s. And so I grew up as a first generation American. And there were a lot of narratives that were told to me in a good way, but then also some that were somewhat damaging, like they are for all of us. And I didn't really uncover any of this until the last couple of years, where I've spent a lot of time really diving deep for myself and really self reflecting. And so, when I was growing up, I spent 1 year in the US, 1 foot in the US and 1 foot in India my whole life. So, we would be here for the academic year. And then over the summers, we would go to India and spend time with our friends and family and our grandparents and all the things. And so oftentimes I think that I was maybe not American enough in the US and then not Indian enough, sometimes feeling like that when I was in India. And so I was constantly trying to navigate. And I think what came out that was really great about that is that I really am able to shift based on whoever it is that I'm talking to. I can be present for whomever, my audience is. The downside of that though is that sense of a little bit of confusion, right? As I was growing up, most people went to rock concerts, and I would watch Hindi movies, and I would watch Indian concerts and all of those things. So it got a little bit confusing. And as I was going through college, and then I went and I worked in investment banking. And what I realized was that there are very few women in investment banking. There are very few Indian women of Indian descent in investment banking. And so I could tell that I was a little bit different. But the interesting thing is I didn't really realize that that was not nearly as different as I felt as a senior leader in an organization, because And it had less to do with the fact that I was Indian and more to do with the fact that I was a woman. So after spending a few years in investment banking, I did a year in microfinance, and then I came back and did another year of banking. Then I went to business school, and then I went back into banking. So there's definitely a little bit of a pattern here. After going back to banking, I spent 11 years at home raising my two daughters. So I shifted from going from investment banking to microfinance in India. So I was working with a lot of white Caucasian men in the banking world. And then I went to working with impoverished women in India who were really just looking for some socioeconomic status and to have some autonomy from their mothers-in-law and their husbands, to then coming back to banking and then going to business school and going back to banking. And then I decided I was going to take 11 years off to raise my girls. Then I went and relaunched right back into my career as if overnight, as if nothing had happened. And so I was, doing great, feeling really great about myself. And I did that for a few years. And then I moved to Washington, D.C. to take a more leadership role, worked again for another 4 years, and then moved to another higher education organization. I was at Johns Hopkins, and I was there for 2 years. And what I realized while I was there was it was lonelier for me to be in a leadership position at an organization than it was for me as a first-generation American of Indian descent working in investment banking in my 20s. So I thought a lot about why that was, and I ended up getting bullied in this role while I was there, and I struggled to navigate that a little bit. And so as I stepped away from the role, and I thought about what else I wanted to do, what I wanted to do next. And I thought a little bit about going back into the workforce, and then I thought a little bit about becoming an entrepreneur, right? And so one of the things that I have really worked on over the last several years is understanding who I am and where some of these limiting beliefs that I've had have come from. And I did a little digging and I dug a little deeper, and I realized that I have my own limiting beliefs, and that's sort of what's preventing me from sometimes overcoming certain obstacles at work, certain conflict at work. So I decided to look into women's coaching, and I've done a lot of career coaching throughout my career. I've done MBA admissions consulting. So I've done a lot of different things in that realm. But this was really the first time that I was focused based on something that I had really struggled with myself. And the more digging that I did, the more I realized that this is a very common thing. And the more conversations I had with women, this is a very common thing. And so I decided that I was going to shift a little bit and start my own company and help women succeed, because I truly believe that if we bring our best selves to work and in our lives, then we will thrive in every aspect of our lives. And we have certain barriers that are different from that of men. And so I really focus on those barriers.
I love that. I think it's a very underserved market. And I feel that there's going to be a lot of value that comes off the back of that as well, because of, there's going to be, like you said, different situations that men go through, but I feel like they're going to be a little bit easier to navigate than a woman, because of, I think the big aspect of women go through their 20s and their 30s is the whole theme and whole narrative of raising children. No, I think that's a massive, massive thing, right? And it's an interesting one of like, okay, well, do I focus on my career now whilst I'm in my prime age, or do I keep putting off children? But I can't put off children forever. And it's a very, very difficult decision to have to make for many, many women. So I'm particularly curious about that. And obviously you took 11 years off, which is a significant amount of time to take away, especially like a lot of things changed over the course of a decade, right? Especially within the world of, I mean, there's probably a lot of things where you went back and like, I can't believe this is still the same and no one's modernized this yet. But I'm sure there's a great deal of things that did change as well. So talk to me about those 11 years. And I'm sure you had a lot of fears going into that as well. What did that look like in terms of taking that step and being so decisive and determined in terms of making that decision?
Yeah. So, actually, I think I was very ready to go back to work by that time. My older daughter was 11 and my younger daughter was 8. And so I think from the perspective of being able to jump right in, I was so ready to jump in. I took on a role in higher education where I was going to be able to help other business school students, teach them how to manage their careers. And that is where I started. And so that was a very comfortable place for me. I also lived in North Carolina. So there was not I wasn't part of a big city where, there was a lot of hustling. It was a very nice very welcoming business school environment. And so that helped me a lot. I think what was wonderful for me, and I say this all the time, is they invested in me. They took a chance on me, someone who hadn't worked in 11 years. And I have never lost sight of that, right? I also give a lot of credit to people who are able to do that, because it does, everything changes. So I'll give you a funny story. So in the US, sports are a really big thing. Color sports are a really big thing. Now, I did not grow up around sports. We talked about that, right? And so I would show up to work and everybody would be wearing black and gold. And I would be in like pink and green. And I'd be wondering what is happening here. And I asked my friend one day, I'm like, why is everybody in black and gold? And she's like, because we have a game. We have a football game this afternoon. And I was like, well, can you tell me the next time we have a football game? Because kind of need to be able to show up so those were the kinds of barriers. The cultural barriers are what I faced, not so much being able to come in and do the work, because I was ready to do that and I was good at it and I knew what I was doing and I felt like I was adding value. So it was more along those lines that I had not only not grown up that way, but I had stepped away from a lot of those things, not having watching sports, for example. So those were more of my barriers. I think what I realized quickly was that I wanted more, that I wanted to move into a higher position quickly. So I actually ended up moving my whole family to the Washington, D.C. area. And that was a very interesting experience. And that's when I started to really hone my managerial skills, right? So you manage a house. I definitely, as an MBA and as somebody who has a very business-oriented mindset, I definitely ran my house in a very business kind of way. We're a team. Kids have their roles. My husband has his roles. I have my roles. And we get it together and we thrive as a team, And so I've always had that mentality. And I brought that definitely into my new role. But what was challenging was that I was not used to working with so many different personalities, which is something that I thought that I was really thriving in before. So I had to jump back into that, right? So that was what got me out of my comfort zone and to work with people who are from very different generations also, right? So when I was in the workforce, it was my generation and the generation above. When I went back into the workforce, I was managing people who were early career, students, early career, mid-career, and C-suite. So that was, I think, what was really jarring for me.
Yeah, I can imagine. Do you have to keep your ear to the ground and your finger on the pulse to a degree to not have so much fears of going back into that? Because I think of people who maybe worked in marketing before the early 2000s, right? Maybe they worked in the 90s or the early 2000s and they took a 10-year, 11-year break. And then all of a sudden on the other side of that is the launch of social media, right? Like Twitter is live, Facebook is live, Instagram's in its early days as well. And obviously social media marketing takes the world by storm. Maybe not so much until I want to say late 2016, 17, 18, but still to a degree, there's a whole new world that you have to navigate and there's people growing up with social media. So do you kind of have to keep your finger on the pulse to that degree with markets and workplaces that change? You mentioned that it wasn't so hard for you to adjust to the work side of things. It was more the generational thing. But do you think it would be advantageous for people who are taking significant time periods off work to make sure that they don't feel that, they're focusing on email marketing when everyone else is focusing on the latest trends on TikTok, for example?
Absolutely. So when I started working, I didn't have a LinkedIn profile, right? And so the first thing I did was I had a resume, but I had no LinkedIn profile. And now if you've stepped away, people will look at your LinkedIn profile before they'll even read your resume, and so if they know that you've applied. And so there are definitely certain trends, and it's really important to make sure that you set yourself up for success. I completely agree, especially if you are going into fields like marketing or sales, because yes, fundamentally sales are similar, but how we do our sales is very different. The technology that we use when we're selling is very different, right? So from that perspective, it's quite different. And if you step away, it also matters whether you step away and you go back into a role that was at the same level as where you left off, or you leverage the skills. Maybe you've worked on some boards, or you've volunteered at schools, whatever it is that you've done as a parent, and you want to go back into the workforce. I think that also makes a difference, because you've probably honed a few new skills doing those things. And so you want to leverage that. Maybe you did social media because you wanted to keep up with the trends, because you knew you were going back into the workforce. The other thing that I think is important is now that we have so much access to LinkedIn courses, Coursera. We have so many different options to find ways to learn things online. So also showing that you are very motivated to learn new things, that yes, you've been out of the workforce for a certain amount of time, but in the last however many years, or even in the last year or two, when you knew that you were going to ramp up to go back to work, it's the story that you tell. It's the things that you learned because you understood that these are the things that you needed to learn. If you are talking about a specific skill, you can say, I talked to a lot of people in this industry, and here's what they told me that I should look into. And so that shows that I've been really resourceful, right? That I'm interested. That shows a pattern, that shows a balance, that shows the drive to want to be part of this community.
Totally. And now I want to talk about the fears that you had making the decision to take the time off work, because obviously these were the fears reintroducing yourself to the workplace. But I think if I'm wondering which feels more brave off the back of those two. I think it's braver to take the decision to actually go off than come back in. But at the same time, they present their different challenges. And obviously, like you said, you were super ready to come back in. So maybe it didn't require as much bravery as taking the time off in the first place. So how did you come to that conclusion that I want to take, I don't know if you had a specific time frame in mind, whether it was 5 years, whether it was a decade, to solely look after my children. I'm not going to maybe dip my toe in the water of this, and that, and do part work, part motherhood, but I'm going to kind of completely invest myself into motherhood. How did you make that decision and be so conclusive about it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So to give you a little bit of background, my husband is in medicine, and we had gotten married. As soon as we got married, he was in New York and I was in Philadelphia. And so after my MBA, I went back to New York, worked there for a year, and he was then going to do a fellowship in Tennessee for 2 years. So we would move from New York to Memphis for a year, then to Nashville for a year, and then to somewhere else. We didn't know where that was going to be after he finished his fellowship. So the idea was, I had just finished my MBA at Wharton, and I worked in New York for 1 year. So it made sense in my mind. I thought, well, it's going to be one job in New York, one job in Memphis, one job in Nashville, and one job wherever we end up. So that's in 4 years, that's 4 different jobs. Maybe that's not the best. It takes time to put yourself out there and interview and do all the things. And so I thought maybe this is a good time to start our family. And so we were lucky enough to start our family when we decided to do that. When we moved to Memphis and Nashville for those years, my younger daughter, I didn't know she was going to be a girl. So when we had her, she was 2 months old when we moved from New York to Memphis. And when she was 2, we were looking at where else we were going to live. And my husband got this great job in North Carolina. So we decided that we were going to shift there. And that time we had decided, when we realized that that's where we were going to go, we thought, okay, maybe this is a time to then have another child, because then I can just raise them together and then go back to work in another year or so after we've settled in our new place. So we again, we're lucky enough to be able to have our second daughter. A year goes, 2 years goes, 3 years go. And the next thing you know, 8 years into living into Winston-Salem, North Carolina, I'm like, okay, I've done my duty. The girls are busier than they're spending more time out doing an activity or at school than they are with me. I'm ready to go back to work. I think what was challenging and I had to battle a little bit was the other voices that were coming at me. You have a Wharton MBA. You're going to work for a year and then take time off, and you're going to kill your career. I had a lot of that, and I think I was very self-assured because I grew up in a family where I was taught that get your education, nobody can ever take that away from you, and life is going to present you with many different challenges. So you're going to have to shift. So think of this as a shift. I had my kids young. I had my daughters young. So I felt like, all right, I'm going to have enough time on the back end to then just build my career then. What I didn't anticipate was that it takes a lot of time, right? To as you said, for all the things to relearn a lot of those things, and regardless of how much confidence you have. So that's my biggest fear was, it was probably going to be harder for me to find a job in Memphis and then in Nashville and then wherever we ended up than it was for me to take that time off. So I felt pretty good about that. It was the second child, and then realizing that, well, it's that mommy guilt. I've given this time to my first child. I want to be able to give it to my second child too. And we happen to be living in a place where we could afford one income. And I think that also makes all the difference, because if I didn't have that choice, then we would be in a very different situation and I would have had to make very different decisions. So truly life happened and I had to adjust. And so that's what I did. But it was less me and it was more the external voices that were telling me that maybe you're not making the right decision for yourself. And that made me think about it a lot more, but then also become a lot more, I reassured myself that no, there's going to be time for all of this. And here's what I need to focus on now. And that's sort of what I went with. And that's what I rolled with.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that I'm not necessarily qualified to say this, don't get me wrong, but I always think about this from a female's perspective is that you can start your career at 30, 35, 40, but you're going to struggle to have children once you get to the age of 35, 40 and onwards thereafter. I know there's a lot more miracles taking place in terms of women having babies a lot older than they typically would. But at the same time, it's much easier to kind of pick that up a little bit later than it would be to try and pick up having a child ultimately. And I think that the value of being a mother and looking after your children is being kind of wipes away. And everyone is thinking that, you know, you get all the highlights and the accolades from climbing the career ladder, but not climbing the motherhood ladder, which I think is a little bit distorted. Don't get me wrong. I think there's many people who that lifestyle is suited towards, but I wonder if you took that pressure away and you shine the spotlight back on motherhood versus careerhood, then I think a lot of people would be making a lot of different decisions as well. But you know, that's a challenge that a lot of women have to go through. So let's come back to you entering the workplace now, and obviously women being within the workplace now. What were some of the big differences you saw within the gender side of things when you came back into the workplace, what you see in 2024 today versus when you left the workplace?
So when I left the workplace, I was still in my 20s. It was a long time ago. So my perspective was also very different. I was in New York focused on making money and focused on learning as much as I possibly could. Right now, at this stage, I'm at a very different stage in my career, and I'm looking back and thinking what I needed to be and how I needed to be back then is very different, and that my priorities were very different. And I think that that's what happens in terms of gender. I think we all start out similarly. As I had mentioned, in my investment banking class, we had a cohort of, I don't even remember how many of us, but there were a cohort of a group of us, let's say 60, and we went through it together. So it was less about gender on the work side of like day-to-day side of things, right? So we worked the same hours. We took the same courses to help improve our skills and things like that. What was different back then is if I went to a meeting, I wore a skirt suit. If I was with a client, I wore a skirt suit. If I went for an interview in investment banking, I was in a skirt suit and tights and all the things and heels and whatnot, right? Now, that's definitely not the case, irrespective of what your career is, in the sense of if you're a 22-year-old looking into investment banking, you're not going to have to show up that way, right? The women are far more empowered to be different, to be who they want to be, as opposed to structured into these, you have to wear this, or you have to do this, or you have to conduct yourself in this way. At the same time, on the later side of my career, it's very different, because now you do have mothers who are juggling, who are trying to build their careers, but also trying to be parents at home, also be supportive. We're also taking care of our parents. So we're taking care of our parents, we're taking care of our kids. So it's just a very different skill set, and it's a very different mentality. So I think everything is different. Everything is different, not only generationally, but now we have more systems in place to also support us. So let me put it this way. So when I was in my investment banking days, I wasn't thinking about helping and supporting my parents, and I wasn't thinking about the things that I'm thinking about now, right? So I was focused on me because, as you said, parents are older when they have children now. And so somebody who may be in their 50s now may have a teenager. And so by the time the teenager gets to that 22-year-old age, and let's say they want to do investment banking, they're going to be grappling with different things. They're not going to be necessarily focused on themselves. They may be part of that sandwich generation where they have to think about not only their fertility and their future, but also how to be in support of their parents. So I think it's just a completely different landscape on both ends, irrespective of where you are in your career and irrespective of what your gender is. At the same time, those pressures are still put more on women than they are on men, right? So back in the day, again, in the investment banking world, in the corporate world, if you told people that you were pregnant and you were a woman, you were going to have a baby. Then it was, is she going to come back? Oh, great. Now she's going to be, busy, and she's not going to have her mind completely on her work like she used to. She was a workhorse. Now she's not. I heard just last week in a group coaching session that I did, where at a law firm, that same conversation about women and, oh no, she's not going to come back. But if a male had said the exact same thing, hey, my wife is, we're expecting, we're going to have a baby. Yay, that's awesome. Great. Congratulations. Right. So that hasn't changed. That's still the case. That's where all these structural problems come in. This is where all the structural challenges come in. And that's what I'm really trying to help with women navigate, because we have to change the structural challenges, but we also have to change the narrative that has been taught to us. It has to come from both sides.
And maybe the internal narrative is easier to change than the system, right? If the system's been in place for the entirety of humankind, then that's probably, unfortunately, not going to change anytime soon, at least in our generation. Maybe we can take steps to change it, but it's much easier to change our internal world than sometimes the external world. And many times when we change our internal world, that helps us contribute towards the external world, right? So with that being said, what type of things do we now need to do if we're a woman in the workplace? Maybe we're in our 20s or we're in our 30s, we're thinking about having a family, we're kind of semi-concerned about the response of our colleagues and the people around us, and even if we're in an entrepreneurial circle, what people are going to say. What can we do to empower our own selves to not be so fearful of that step, both from a perspective of what other people will think and what impact it will have on me and my career as well, to empower us, essentially, to empower our position and to make sure that we are equipped for the next steps and, thereafter, and ensuring that when we are done with the early stages of motherhood and we want to re-enter the workplace, that we have no fears and we know that we're going to come back just as strong.
Yeah, I think there's two things. I think one is the confidence piece. It's to work on the self-confidence and to understand your path, to be flexible in knowing that it's not, you can want to start a family, you can want to work, you can want to do a lot of things, but there are a lot of other structural issues. What does the job market look like? What does your timing look like? Your fertility process, all of that, right? So that piece of it plays such a big role that you have to go in with somewhat of an open mind, I think, and also have the confidence in knowing that you're going to make the best decisions that you can given the information that you have. And if you, whatever it is that you're feeling less confident about, really understanding where is that lack of confidence coming from? Is that something, again, that some narrative that was told to you when you were younger and it doesn't really hold anymore? Or is that something that is external that is being told to you now? Or is that something that you can work on? Or maybe it's not even true. And so you can step away. What we want to do is we want to create a self-concept that's going to thrive as a parent and in this process and as someone in the workforce, because they don't happen mutually exclusively. Everything happens together. And there are different levers that are pulling at different stages of our lives that are going to tell us where we need to be stronger in some places and where we need to pull back in other places. And really that confidence piece, making sure that you have the capacity to silence or at least quiet that inner critic. That doesn't mean the inner critic isn't going to show up. It means that when the inner critic shows up, we know how much of that is actual truth. We know how to quiet it and work around it. We're not saying ignore it. We have to work with it. The other piece of it is the communication piece, right? So how you communicate that you're expecting at work, how you're communicating your process, how you're communicating what the next 10 months or the next 10 years look like for you, that's really critical. I still believe that you should not say anything to anyone at work until you absolutely have to. And I think it's also, unfortunately, I just heard this yesterday where there was a woman who had confided in her boss that she was expecting, and she got a call from HR and it put several things into motion, and she trusted her boss, and it was a sort of an off the record comment and conversation, but she trusted her boss, and it didn't really work out in her favor. So it's very difficult to know who says what to whom. And there are a lot of actions that happen behind the scenes. We go into work, we give our best selves, but unfortunately there are things that are happening And institutions are looking out for themselves. Institutions don't love us. We love us. We love each other, but institutions can't love us, right? So from that perspective, I think it's really important to be mindful about how you communicate, who you communicate to, and when you communicate it. And that does depend on the industry to some extent. But that's really a very important piece, because if you communicate too early, then that can really end up hurting you. And you want to set yourself up for success. And honestly, the best way to do that is to really talk to somebody who's able to guide you in that, because everyone's situation is going to be different, and everyone's expectations, everyone's household, everyone's work commitments, their social commitments, their sandwich generation commitments, all family commitments, all of that is going to be very different. So it's so individual. So I hesitate to say do this and don't do this, but I say focus on these two things. Focus on your confidence and where there may be some gaps and what you need to fill so that you can set yourself up for success, and focus on how you communicate the information, not just how you communicate it, when you communicate it, how you communicate it, and to whom you communicate it.
Yeah, I like that. It's like covering yourself from both ends, the perspective of making sure that you're setting yourself up for success on your way out, and then also setting yourself up for success on your way back in as well, and kind of being very firm with that within your own mind and body and heart before you then obviously go and express that to the world. And to play devil's advocate for a moment, do you think that there's a point that maybe these corporations have, in the sense that a woman may come back less motivated? She may not be as productive as she once was. She may be more focused on her sandwich generation responsibilities and now her childcare. And, don't get me wrong, like, let's talk about the reality of energy. If we have 5 things to focus on versus 2, then it's no longer a 50-50 split. It's 20% in all cups. Not necessarily that level of split, but it's energy distributed throughout 5 things versus 2 things. So do you think that there's a fair point, and how can we navigate that to understand the concerns from a company's perspective, but also trying to live our life and trying to have everything that it can offer us? And family is a big part of that for many of us.
Yeah. So I think a lot of the conservative companies are struggling with this a lot more. So there's a lot to unpack there, right? There's the political aspect of things, which in the US is getting more and more interesting as we move up to the election. And there's the piece of women who are really struggling to manage their home life and their childcare because it's so expensive, right? So there are these external factors let's take this just from a family's perspective. Let's take this from an organization's perspective, right? So what is the alternative? Is the alternative to have a whole bunch of men in your organization without that diverse perspective? I don't think that organizations are going to do very well if that's the mindset that they keep up with. It goes back to a lot of what we were saying earlier. It's that when we bring certain skills to the workforce that are really amazing, our ability to balance these things. I've worked with women at so many different stages, their early career. I've worked as a manager, I've worked with men and women at so many different stages. It's not to say that men aren't organized, but we are hyper organized. We have to it's almost like it's in our DNA. We have to set ourselves up for success. In order to be that way, we have to be hyper organized. We have to be hyper ambitious. We have to be all of those things, because that's how it's been set up for us. So a lot of us have that innately in us. And so organizations essentially are going to lose out if they don't recognize that and they don't make it more of a space for us to thrive in, right? And if you've got clients, if you're in an organization and you're very client facing and you only show up with men on your team, then that's not 2024 either, right? And you want to take pride in your ability to be open and all the things that you want to take in your values, right? If your values are not aligned with what 2024 looks like for most of us in this world, then you're probably not going to thrive as well in this world. And there are so many more educated women. We have a lot more things that we're balancing, but we're also building all of those skills as we're balancing our lives, right? So our ability to manage these different things and all the strengths, I think, far outweigh this archaic philosophy of they're not going to come in motivated. We have no choice. We always come in motivated. We always work our best. We always bring our best. I mean, I'm generalizing, but as a gender, we thrive in that. And so I think that organizations are going to lose out if they don't create a structure in which we can really thrive.
Absolutely. And I think that it's also a different perspective as well. I think it's just looking at your workforce as rather than like a male and female split, but recognizing that different people, whether they're within the same gender or not, are going to be suited to different things. There's a funny thing that my father-in-law always says something along those lines of like, that's why you need a woman in your life, Elliot. And my wife and I always make fun of the reality, because there's many things where I'm super logical and I'm thinking of something like 1 + 1 = 2, or very black and white. And she puts in something gray that makes life so much easier, or just gives a different perspective that just adds in such a beautiful way that I never would have worked out in my analytical mind. And I think that that's what you're touching on there. Is just there's so many things that can make your company more efficient, more productive, more personal, more from a place of empathy and care, which actually many times, companies and especially with a new generation that you've probably seen as well, I think many times consumers care more about where the company comes from, not what they deliver to us, but also the ethics and values that they have behind them. And I think women have a great idea and a great way of just integrating that so naturally. A man would maybe have some elements of that, but they would almost have to force that and it would look forced. Whereas when you have a woman's perspective and a woman's touch, that's where things come in. And it just reminded me of that, is that, you might get a lot done and it might look very productive and very like formatted and logical and analytical, but that's not everything within a business. As we know, it's relationships, it's communication, it's the way that your brand looks and everything along those lines. And I think that if we looked at it from a perspective, okay, we've got a lot of hard workers here and they come out and they spit out output, but then we've also got the more strategic people over here, and we don't have to gender define them. We can say generally, maybe women are going to fit more into the empathy and care side of things, and men maybe are going to fit a little bit more into the logical, analytical side of things, but there's going to be kind of a little bit of both in everyone, right? But I think it's maybe for companies looking at it from a bigger picture perspective versus we just need people who work hard and can produce outcomes. It's like we need a little bit of everything to function in the most productive way, full stop.
Absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head here, because there's masculine energy and there's feminine energy. And it doesn't mean that women don't have masculine energy, and it certainly doesn't mean that men don't have feminine energy. We have all of it. It's just a question of the balance, right? The percentages, let's say. So for a company, for a family, for any institution to thrive, you need to have some kind of a balance, right? And so I think, so we're saying the same thing in that you need both. You need both to be, they bring some very solid skills. That masculine energy has some very solid skills. Women, feminine energy, very solid skills. And if we really want to do well, then we need both. And that's the key. And so if we've set men well up for success so that they can bring their authentic and best selves, we need to now figure out how to do a better job of setting women up for success. And that, I think, there's two parts to that. There's the organizational part to that, and then there's the self-work part of that, right? So a lot of that also has to do with how we show up ourselves as women, how we present ourselves, how we bring our confidence or lack of confidence, and all the things that come with that.
Yeah, I think it's about just putting the accountability back in people's hands as well. No, it's like, it doesn't matter what your gender is that you need to go do your work. You need to go heal. You need to understand your inner critic. You need to make sure that doesn't, it might give you some good hints from now and again, but it's making sure that that's not everything you believe. It's just a touch of like, I'm going to take what's useful here and I'm going to just try and just park the part that I know is just a normal critical part of my mindset, right? And I think that for everyone, they just need to kind of go in and do that work. And if organizations can set people up for success from that perspective, and again, it's like that, I don't know if you've seen, it's like a meme where it's like when they're trying to judge animals by their ability to climb a tree, right? And it's like, well, a monkey's going to do an amazing job, but an elephant might not. And, a bird might be doing a good job, but they're not climbing the tree. They're flying up the top. It's like everyone is suited to different things, but if you base them on this one given test, then they're probably not going to do that great of a job, but they have many different strengths. So I think that that's a big thing. It requires a lot of consciousness and responsibility from companies, but at the same time, if ultimately we want our thing and our company and our organizations at work, then it comes with all of those factors included, right? And I think that's what you're getting at, right? Is responsibility of the individual, and there's responsibility of the company to allow our people to thrive.
I think part of it is also what we started our conversation on, which is that there are not that many women in leadership positions. And so a lot of this would change if we had more women in leadership positions, right? Because they understand that mindset, because they themselves are bringing that mindset to the table. And so the more women that we keep in the workforce, the more women that we encourage to move to those positions, who have the confidence to do those things, the better off everybody is going to be, because we're not all of a sudden going to be excluding men. We're going to just be including more women, right? And then that perspective and all of that falls into place in a different way. The other challenge, which we also talked about, was the changes in a woman's body over time, and what she wants or doesn't want or can have and can't have, and all of those factors that men don't have to really consider at all, right? So if my husband and I are both working in a corporate job, let's say, and if we want to start a family, I have to think about all the things. He just has to go to work the next day. Maybe he'll have paternity leave. Maybe he's thinking, well, I want to work for an organization that's going to have paternity leave. And there may be certain things I want to work in an organization where I can pick up my kids from school at a certain time. Those men and women are both going to be facing, right? Currently, it's still more of that is put on the woman, but the physical and all of the other things that come with that, it's whether you're pregnant or giving birth or nursing or whatever it is, that, as far as we know, is still going to be on the woman, right? So that's not changing anytime soon. So from that perspective, we have these challenges that we have to work around.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. And I think that's a beautiful part to wrap up there. And I want to ask you a couple of final questions. And the first is, what impact do you want to have on the world with the work that you do, Raina?
Yeah, I want women to live fulfilled lives because they're making choices on their own terms, in terms of whether they want to work, whether they want to stay at home, whether they want to do some sort of hybrid, when they have children, whether or not they want to have children, and whatever it is that they want to do, I want them to be able to do that on their own terms and in their own way.
Absolutely. No, I think that's super, super beautiful. And where is the best place for people to find you if they want to keep up with the work that you're doing?
Great place is on LinkedIn. It's Raina B. Gandhi, Raina B, and then Gandhi. I have my website. It's www.risingtideconsultingllc.com. And they're most welcome to send me an email at Raina, Raina, at risingtideconsultingllc.com as well. And I'm on Instagram. It's rising.tide.consulting. That's another great place.
Amazing. Raina, thank you so much for your time today. I truly appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me, Elliot. I appreciate your time, and I had such a great conversation with you. Thanks for all of your insight as well. That was a great conversation.